Good day, grade 10 students. It's your teacher Cesar Lapay with another lesson for today. It's good to see you back. Okay, last meeting I asked you to bring your coloring materials for our lesson for today. Did you bring your own materials? Very good. Now let's proceed with our activity with this lesson. Before anything else, let us first have a short prayer. Gracious and loving Creator, as I prepare to embark on this journey of learning, I humbly come before you, seeking your guidance and blessings. Fill my heart with the spirit of enthusiasm, curiosity, and the hunger for knowledge. Open my mind to grasp new concepts, engage in critical thinking, and embrace the joy of discovery. Grant me the ability to teach, absorb information with clarity, retain it with ease, and apply it with wisdom. Strengthen my memory, sharpen my focus, and deepen my understanding. Help me to overcome any challenges or obstacles that may come in my way, instilling in me resilience and perseverance. Bless all my students, dear Lord, with wisdom and patience. May they inspire all the teachers to grant me the humility to seek their guidance, the courage to ask questions, and the humility to learn from my mistakes. As I step to this classroom, may I be a beacon of kindness, respect, and encouragement to my fellow teachers and also to their fellow students. Help us support and uplift one each other, fostering an environment of collaboration and camaraderie. In your infinite grace, bless this classroom with an atmosphere of positivity, understanding, and growth. May all the lessons that I teach not only enhance my personal development but also their personal development to contribute positively to the world around me. I surrender my fears and doubts to you, dear Lord, trusting that you will be with me every step of the way. Thank you for the opportunity to teach this class and grow. May this class be a stepping stone towards a brighter future. In your holy name I pray. Amen. did you enjoy the activity that I gave you? Of course you are. So the activity that I gave you, and you should take a picture of your artworks and send it in our group chat. And that will serve as your attendance today. Okay, so now let us proceed to our lesson.
When you think of art in the 1800s, you might imagine grand historical subjects, mythological scenes, and traditional themes. Lots of them. Well, that's what art used to be before Impressionists changed the course of it forever. Why is Impressionism considered such an important art movement? What was so groundbreaking about it? Why do we think of Impressionists as the pioneers of modern art? Many questions, but we've got the answers. So let's get into it. If you'd like to see more art episodes, be sure to give us a like and tell us which topics you want to learn about next. In 19th century Paris, the main art exhibition was called the Salon. This annual exhibition was organised by the Academy of Fine Arts, and the Academy loved grand historical subjects, mythological scenes, and traditional themes. We can even say that the jury of the Salon had quite a conservative taste. The jury got to choose whose works were to be exhibited, and those who didn't make the cut got a dramatic R for rejected stamped on the back of the painting. But then came the Impressionists, who didn't just want to sit around and wait for the Salon jury to accept them. They wanted to become independent from the Salon and its artistic expectations. They called themselves the Anonymous Society of Painters, Sculptors and Printmakers. And they decided to organise their own exhibitions. Their very first exhibition was held in Paris in 1874 at a studio of the French photographer Nadar. And so, the famous modern art movement called Impressionism was born. The movement was led by artists like Claude Monet, Edgar Degas, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Camille Pissarro, and Berthe Morisot. And during the next 12 years until 1886, Impressionists held 8 of their own exhibitions in total. Take that, Paris Salon! The term Impressionism came from Claude Monet's painting Impression Sunrise. This famous work shows the harbour of the city of Le Havre in northern France. An art critic called Louis Leroy called this painting an impression, but he meant it in a bad way and described the work as unfinished. Little did he know how popular Impressionism was going to get. Imagine his face if he knew the prices of Monet's works at auctions today. Compared to academic painting exhibited at the Paris Salon, Impressionists' work looked different indeed. They seemed more casual and informal, with loose brushstrokes and a tendency not to copy everything realistically from nature.
So Impressionists rejected showing historical, biblical, mythological, or allegorical subjects. They in fact loved showing modern life. And Paris was rebuilt during the 19th century, so it became a real urban center and the population grew, so all the public places were always filled with people. And Impressionists found inspiration in that and in those new experiences that a modern city could offer.
Many Impressionists ditched the studio and went outside. They loved painting outdoors, or should we say, en plein air. This is one of the reasons why their canvases weren't too big. Smaller canvases were easier to carry and transport around. Impressionists also loved playing with light and colour in their paintings. We can see best how light can affect the mood and atmosphere of a place when looking at Impressionist works. Let's look at the Rouen Cathedral series by Monet, where we have the same place painted over and over again, but in different ways. The time of day and the weather affects the light, the colour and the atmosphere of the place, and it makes it a bit different each time. Synthetic paints in tubes developed during the 19th century also made it possible for Impressionists to use new shades of colours. These artists tended to show complementary colours like red and green, violet and yellow, and blue and orange painted next to each other and not blended together. This way the colours seemed more intense, and you can probably notice that the Impressionists didn't use a lot of dark tones or a lot of black. During Monet's funeral, the French statesman Georges Clemenceau even removed the black cloth that was draped over the coffin and said no black for Monet. Black is not a colour. A number of Impressionist works show leisurely activities of middle-class French society. We can see scenes of swimming and boating, sitting in cafes or going to the opera. In works like the colourful Bal de Moulin de Galette by Renoir, we see people interacting, dancing, talking, flirting and enjoying themselves in the bohemian Montmartre district in Paris. Wherever we look, we see urban life happening. Renoir used loose brushstrokes and colours that make the whole scene look sunlit and lively. The artist often painted scenes from modern life. We can also look at his work La Loge, where a man and a woman are sitting in the theatre. It's good to know that these Parisians often went to the theatre and the opera not just for the show, but to be seen and see who else will be there. While painters like Renoir and Cassatt showed us what the audience looked like, the famous Impressionist Edgar Degas often painted what was happening on stage. Degas spent many years painting ballerinas. Back then, most ballet dancers came from working-class backgrounds, and many of the young teenage ballerinas in training, also known as petits rats, were sexually exploited. Degas himself also wasn't always nice to these young ballerinas, making his models pose for hours in uncomfortable positions. He even called them the little monkey girls. You might be wondering, were there any women Impressionists? And the answer is yes. Women Impressionists like Berthe Morisot and Mary Cassatt focused on depicting the upper classes of the French society, and they both came from wealthy families themselves.
So in their paintings, these two artists show the lives of bourgeoisie women, and they painted the private spaces that they had access to because of their gender.
They often depicted domestic subjects, since women had restricted access to other places that men painted. Morisot's work The Cradle was exhibited at the first Impressionist exhibition in 1874. The work shows her sister with a baby, so a very intimate moment indeed. Mary Cassatt also painted scenes from domestic life. In her work Little Girl in a Blue Armchair, we see a fashionably dressed child during her private moment and within a private space, looking bored while sitting next to her dog. As you can see, Impressionists embraced modernity and moved away from biblical, historical or mythological scenes. They celebrated the topics taken from everyday life. They took the freedom to show scenes from Parisian cafes or nearby bathing spots. These artists also showed the world that things didn't always have to be represented realistically. They wanted to depict their own way of looking at things and show the atmosphere of a place. During their time, the Impressionist way of looking at art was considered revolutionary. In many ways, Impressionism was defining for many modern art movements that were yet to come. And it's safe to say that it affected the course of modern art greatly. Hey Muses, so what's your impression of Impressionism? Which artist or artwork did you enjoy most? Can you notice loneliness, anxiety, isolation or raw sexuality in these paintings? How about in this one? These are all topics that Expressionist artists showed in their artworks. Expressionism was an international movement of the early 20th century, and it was present not only in art but in architecture, theatre, cinema, dance and literature too. The roots of the Expressionist aesthetic can be found in post-Impressionist and Symbolist artworks, but also in photo-expressionist works like Edvard Munch's Scream. So let's dive into the most expressive period in art history together. If you'd like to see more art episodes, be sure to give us a like and tell us which topics you want to learn about next. Expressionists aimed to show true emotions in their works, and those emotions were often scary, dark, worrying and, well, not so positive. But Expressionists wanted to show life as it truly was for them, a life filled with the anxiety and alienation present in the modern world. They often used bold colours and more abstract forms in order to get their message across, or to say it more precisely, to show their emotions thoroughly. Explorations of the human psyche and the popularity of psychoanalysis also influenced the expressionist focus on the self and the subjective ways of looking at life. When we think about expressionism in the visual arts, two groups of artists seem to be particularly important. Both were based in Germany, in Dresden, Munich and Berlin. These groups were known as the Blue Rider and the Bridge. The artists connected to these two groups defined the style of expressionism in art. So let's talk about Die Brücke, or The Bridge, created in 1905. The Bridge was founded by artists Carl Schmidt-Rottluff, Fritz Bleyl, Erich Heckel and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. The name of the group was taken from the writings of the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously wrote, "What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end." And this artistic bridge of our expressionists was supposed to represent a path between the present and the future, and a path between the artist and the viewer. These expressionist artists showed what it was like to live in a modern city with all the angst that this life could carry with it. Like in Kirchner's 1908 work Street Dresden, we see a crowded street city that screams intensity. And the bold colours Kirchner used helped make the scene seem even more extreme. The sidewalk is painted pink, and we can assume that it probably wasn't pink in real life. The same goes for the faces of the two women we see approaching. Their faces are green and orange, quite intense. Expressionists also embraced printmaking, especially woodcuts. Prints were easier to distribute, so more people could see expressionist artworks. They also often portrayed nudes, but in a new, modern way. The poses in these often sexually charged images seemed casual and natural, completely different from the female nude poses people were used to seeing in academic art. In Erich Heckel's woodcut print, Francie Reclining, we see a young model, Francie, who often modelled for expressionists, lying in a slightly awkward way. The scene is quite different from your typical portrait of a nude in art history. The way in which Francie's face was portrayed was inspired by African masks. Like many other artists of the time, including Fauvists or Cubists, the German expressionists were inspired by non-Western art that was known as primitive art. Kirchner was inspired by the art created by the native artists of Africa and Oceania that he saw at the Ethnological Museum in Dresden, while Emil Nolde, another member of the Bridge, also visited the Ethnographic Museum in Berlin frequently. Unfortunately, the Bridge group was short-lived and it disbanded just before the start of World War I. Now, let's travel to Munich, where Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Rider, was born. The Blue Rider was active from 1911 until 1914, and it was founded by the famous Russian artist Vasily Kandinsky. The name of the group was inspired by a frequent motif we see in Kandinsky's works, a horse rider. Horses were also seen in works of another Blue Rider member, Franz Marc. The group consisted of two other Russian artists, Alexei von Jawlensky and Marianne von Werefskin, and German artists like Paul Klee and August Macke. Kandinsky, who had the gift of synesthesia, wanted to explore the ways in which music affected spiritual states, so he started painting visual equivalents to music. These paintings he often liked to name improvisations or compositions. In works like Composition 7, Kandinsky aimed to show how something musical could also be visualized by abstract forms. Unfortunately, because of World War I, the artistic group stopped working together. Kandinsky had to move back to Russia, while Macke and Marc were killed during the war. In Austria, Expressionism was present in the works of artists Oskar Kokoschka and Egon Schiele. Schiele, in particular, was mentored by none other than the famous Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Focusing mainly on portraits and self-portraits, Schiele often showed the problems of the psyche, the anxiety of the individual, and raw sexuality that was considered shocking. We can notice all of these things in his painting called Seated Male Nude from 1910. In what happens to be a self-portrait, we see an expressive, intense, almost disturbing idea of one's body. Another Austrian painter connected to Viennese Expressionism was a man called Oskar Kokoschka. Kokoschka also worked as a writer. In fact, he wrote a play called Murderer, the Hope of Women, that is now considered one of the first expressionist plays ever. In his self-portrait, Knight Errant, we see Kokoschka lying in the middle of the painting dressed in a medieval armour suit. The landscape around him seems to be quite stormy and disturbing, and we can sense that there is an inner struggle going on in the main figure, a very unsettling image indeed. Expressionists aim to show emotional intensity. Showing realistic features of people, places or things wasn't as important as showing the reality of one's inner world. And Expressionism represents an important chapter in the history of modern art. The Expressionist ways of showing things affected art movements like New Objectivity, Neo-Expressionism and obviously Abstract Expressionism greatly. What do you think about Expressionism? Do you find it disturbing? Who's your favourite Expressionist artist?
Okay, that's all with our discussion. Now, for your assignment. With all the available materials at your home, make a mini installation art. For instance, you may use matchsticks or barbecue sticks. Assemble these to construct your mini installation art resembling the Cordillera Labyrinth of Roberto Villanueva. A rubric is prepared to assess your output. Okay, I hope you learned something from today's lesson. And see you all again till the next lesson. Bye, grade 10 students.